everyone and welcome. Today I'm going to show you all the books that I read in May. Now in May I read a total of 6 books, 4 of them I listened to on audiobook and then 2 I read physically. That's something that I'm not too happy with because I've said in the past that I would like to keep the numbers around 50-50. But I have realized that I'm currently at a point in my life that I just don't really have a lot of time to sit down and read a book, while I do have a lot of time to listen to a book while I'm doing something else. Part of that is my job. I have a pretty hectic job and currently I am working on my first article for my PhD, so that's quite exciting, but of course also a lot of work. Part of that is that I have started the booktube channel and I think that at least 10 hours a week I spent on that, just on my channel, so not on watching other people's videos, which is something that I did in the past as well and I still continue to do, of course. So that's just the way it is now and I think that I will have to learn to live with that. So I'm just going to leave that. I'm glad with what I've done. I'm glad with the amount of books as well, 6 books, even though I do try to read a little bit more in June, so fingers crossed that I'll be able to do that. What I'm not that happy with is that I had 2 disappointing reads, so that's always something that's not nice. You try to pick up books that you're going to love, but as always, I will go over the books chronologically, so we will talk about those when we get there. And without further ado, let's get into the books. And the first one that I finished was actually an audiobook, and that was Morning Star by Pierce Brown. I actually have a full non-spoiler review for the entire Red Rising trilogy, so I will not go into it any deeper. I will say that I quite enjoyed Morning Star. I think that I enjoyed it a little bit less than Golden Sun, which is the second book in the trilogy. Part of that is just personal preference. I liked Darrow's position in Golden Sun more than the position that he had in Morning Star, but part of that is also that I think that the writing style in Golden Sun was better and more consistent than in Morning Star, where he did a couple of things, well, especially one thing that just didn't really feel right. But all in all, I still really enjoyed Morning Star and I do recommend everybody to pick up this trilogy, especially if you're new to sci-fi but you have some experience with fantasy. I think that this is a great transition. Then next up I listened to Trader's Moon by Lynn Llewellyn. This is not Trader's Moon, it's another one in the series, but Trader's Moon has not arrived on my doorstep yet. And Trader's Moon was one of those disappointments that I talked about. It's the 3rd one in the Night Runner series where we follow Alec and Sergal. And the reason that it was a disappointment was that in general I don't really care for the political intrigue in this trilogy or in this series. I care about Alec and Sergal and their relationship. And you didn't really have a lot of that in the 3rd book. It was a lot of the political intrigue and I wasn't invested, I wasn't really following it that closely. So unfortunately a disappointment. However, I have heard that the 4th one is a fan favorite. So I am going to read that one this month. So my hopes are high that I will hopefully love that a little bit more, or a lot more hopefully, than the 3rd one, because yeah, I was expecting more of it. Then next up I picked Sister Song by Lucy Holland. This is a standalone and it's actually a retelling of the murder ballad of the Tross sisters, if I'm not mistaken. I don't know that ballad, so I can't really tell you anything about it. And I went into this one blindly. So this was on my anticipated releases list and I actually quite enjoyed it. In this one you follow 3 sisters and it's a sort of medieval England setting where you have these 3 sisters who are daughters of a king. And magic, very closely connected to nature, was always present in the land. You also have a druid character, but now you have this Christianity, you have a Christian priest who comes in and who kind of disturbs all of these things, who wants this magic connected to nature to be gone and who wants nobody else to use it. That's a theme that I quite enjoy. You have a lot of that in Juliet Marillier's works, you also have that in the Winter Night trilogy, you have it in the Lost Queen trilogy, so it's definitely something that drew me in immediately. But then you also have a lot of other things going on. You have this mysterious warrior who suddenly comes into this kingdom and also sets a lot of things in motion. So in general, I enjoyed it. I don't think that I enjoyed it as much as I was thinking I was going to, because you had a lot of clunky moments as well. It went up and down. Sometimes you say it had a weird beginning or it had a weird ending or the middle was a little bit slow, but here it just keep getting up and down. It was quite a bumpy road, but in general I am satisfied that I picked it up and I would definitely recommend it if a couple of the things that I said appeal to you. And then I picked up Malice by John Gwynne. I actually picked it up before, but that's when I finished it after Sister Song. I actually have a vlog where I talk about a part of this book, and I also have, of course, a spoiler-filled discussion together with Steve, talks about books and stuff. Stacey's all booked, Walker writes 7, and also Epic Tales for a small part. And I actually really enjoyed this. I think that of everybody who was reading it, besides maybe Epic Tales, I definitely enjoyed it most of all. And I can definitely see the problems of this book, or at least some of the negative aspects that weren't as strong. But Nonetheless, I just enjoyed it a lot. I definitely enjoy Corbin's storyline most of all, but I'm really excited to see what happens next. The only thing that I'm a little bit afraid of is I really enjoyed this one, but then a lot of people said, well, you will enjoy the next one of the series more. Malice is the weakest one. But I do hope that what we will see more in the second is what I love, because as I said, I liked Corbin's storyline most of all, and the other ones have a lot of action and a lot of fighting, and that's fine by me, but it's not something to pull me in. So I do hope that the second one has not more of that and then less of Corbin's wholesome story a little bit. Nonetheless, I do also like the twists on the more traditional sides of fantasy, so I'm very glad that I picked this one up, and I'm quite excited to read Valor, which is the second one in the quartet, I guess that you would call it, this month. Then I finished another trilogy this month, and that was Merlin Redux, which is the third one in the Enchanter General trilogy by Dave Duncan. Unfortunately, the author passed away, I think, last year, but I really enjoyed this trilogy. As you can see, the trilogy is tiny, because this is, all of them are like this. They are below 300 pages. This one is 260. It's historical fantasy. It's set in medieval England. You have this page boy who gets more and more notorious until he is the actual Enchanter General. And what I really liked about this trilogy is that they are so fast, they are so small, you can read them in between very easily, but the author knows a lot about medieval England, so he sprinkles in some of the facts that he knows. A part of it is how is a keep built up, for example. I didn't know that. And it's done in a way that it's not boring, it's not a history class, it's not very detailed, like you have in some historical fantasy. It's very easy to follow, but you learn a little bit about that, and I quite enjoyed that. You also have Henry II, if I'm not mistaken, in the first book, but then in the third one, for example, you have his son, Richard Lionheart, and his other son, John. So if you know a little bit about that with Robin Hood, for example, then that's also something that quite drew me in, and I liked the conclusion. I think that maybe the third book was the one that I found strongest, where you have also a part of the Crusade that's going on. So I'm quite happy that I picked this one up, because I never hear anybody talking about this on BookTube. So yeah, definitely one that I was pleasantly surprised by. And then the last book that I finished this month was actually another one of the disappointments. This was definitely the biggest one. And that is The Once and Future Witches by Alex E. Harrow. This was a buddy read together with Aaron over at The Ramblin' Reader, and I didn't enjoy this one. To be honest, I think that Erin did, and I know that a lot of people do. I think that she gave it 3 or 3.5 stars. I would rate it a lot less than that, just because it didn't click for me. I think that the writing style was beautiful. And in general, that's something that can definitely pull me in. But for me, always the characters and the storyline need to be good. And then the writing style can make it even better. But if that isn't really there, then the writing style, okay, it's fine, but it's not going to keep me invested. So even though the writing style was whimsical, it was perfect in that aspect, I just wasn't connected to these 3 sisters, because here you also follow 3 sisters, and I think in Sister Song it was done a little bit better, because I was not invested in any of them. They could have basically died, all 3 at the end, and I wouldn't have cared. And that's a very bad sign. Also, the setting. So I knew that this was set around the turn of the century, so from 1800s to 1900s, and you have the suffragette movement there. Now, historical fantasy for me is fine if it's long ago, where medieval England, for example, or medieval Ireland, where it almost feels like a fantasy world because it's so different from our modern society. But early 1900s doesn't really feel like that. So I knew that that was a personal problem. It isn't a problem with the book. But besides that, I also just think that I wasn't invested. I thought that I would like the feminist aspect in this one with the suffragette movement, but it was so on the nose that I was getting annoyed by it. And for example, each passage, the author is trying to fit in saying how women are being, subjected to a lot of cruel things and how women are oppressed by the patriarchy. But she tells it, and it's so on the nose, she doesn't show it, she tells it. One of the things that I found, I was rolling my eyes at, is when let's say that we have a character here who's called Katie, and somebody says Katie's man. And then there's like a whole passage about how nice it is that now a man is in the possession of a woman, because, Katie's man, while for centuries it's always blah blah's wife. And how that's always possession and oppression and stuff like that. I thought like, okay, yeah, you can make a problem out of everything, I guess, but that's not a sign of possession. When I say that's my husband, I'm not saying that's my possession. I'm just saying that's a relationship that I have with that person. And I think that that's how you always say it. So that wasn't really an example of oppression to me, but the author spent a lot of time and a lot of page numbers, or you know, at least an entire passage on that. And I thought that that was too much. And if that was the only thing, okay. But like I said, it was almost every other page that something like that happened. And it almost make the problem trivial, because she chose so many trivial stuff to pay attention to. Like show the real problems. And I would have liked that. But this was too much. Also, yeah, sorry, I'm going on a rant here. But last thing. She has a lot of representation of marginalized groups here, and I like that, but here, and I'm not saying that that was her intention, that's how it felt to me. It felt like she was ticking off boxes. Okay, I can put in a character like that here, and then a character like that, and maybe like that. And it didn't really feel genuine. Again, I'm not saying that it wasn't. That's how it felt. And then with everything else combined, I really didn't like the ones in Future Witches. I skimmed through the end. I read each sentence, but I was really like quick reading because I didn't care, but I just wanted to finish it. And this was definitely a reason why I didn't read a lot of physical books, because it probably took me 3 weeks to finish this one, and it's not that long. So yeah, maybe I should have just DNF'd it, but... So maybe Alex E. Harrow is just an author that's not for me. I am going to try her new release, because it's a fairy tale retelling. If I don't like that one either, I'm not going to pick anything up by her, but we'll see. So those were all of the books that I read in May. Please let me know in the comments down below if you had a couple of amazing reads in May that I should definitely try out, or if you, like me, had some disappointments, unfortunately. As always, I hope that you enjoyed the video, and see you next time. Bye!